Hello again, friends. I wanted to showcase a new mix deck for you guys. This deck is called Dungatama. It's simply a mix of Dungaree and the 3 Nubatama units that we have available right now. I'm not using Hagakure in this deck because I'm not focused on having a Nubatama Vanguard. So that's the only Nubatama unit that's not in this deck. The starter is Exorcist Mage DanDan. He's very important because his ability allows you to bind a card for Dungaree, an extra card. And the reason why this is so key is because previously if you played a Dungaree as a rearguard, it would always be 9,000 power. This card allows you to play a rearguard Dungaree and have it actually keep that 11,000 power base. And that is extremely important because of certain cards to make magic numbers. For the rest of the grade zeros, we have 16 critical triggers. Now, I don't play 16 crits unless there's a specific reason, so when I get around to my grade 3s, I will let you know exactly why there are 16 crits in here. I have 2 Eradicator of Fire Kogajis. Kogaji's effect is if your opponent has 3 or more damage, he boosts for 10,000 power. With Dungaree as the Vanguard, this guy will make a 21k row. That's really all he's here for, but 21k in this deck is super important, and I will let you know why when I get to Dungaree. Rising Phoenix is a 5,000 power grade 1 that allows you to Soul Blast 2 to draw a card. Now, I have all of my grade 2s and higher set up specifically for this unit, so that he can make 16,000 power higher rows, and he is also perfectly fine for putting behind your Vanguard if you happen to miss Kogaji, just because it's not going to make a difference whether you have him boosting or Red River Dragoon boosting, and you're not going to want Dreadmaster to be boosting your Vanguard because it'll be wasted that way. Red River Dragoon is just there for some early meat, and he can make 20k with Whirlwind Axe Wielding Exorcist Knight. That's pretty much all he's here for, but you can see that I have 2-2-2 for these grade 1 splits, just for that reason. Wyvern Guard Guld is probably going to be your preferred grade 1 ride. He also gives you the ability to, of course, perfect guard for your Dungaree. If you miss Dungaree and have to ride Dreadmaster or Voidmaster, then you're pretty much out of luck anyway. So I built this deck just for the best case scenarios, because if you don't get the best case scenarios, the deck's not going to perform optimally anyway. We have Dreadmaster over here. Dreadmaster is when he boosts a Nubatama and the attack hits, doesn't have to be a Vanguard, then you can counterblast 1 and your opponent has to discard 1 card from their hand of their choice. This is very good because if you swing him at a rearguard, it means that no matter what happens, your opponent is going to have to discard a card from their hand. Well, of course, if this is boosting a Nubatama. But that's what we're going to set our rows up for, and that's going to be very important when I get to the grade 3s. Hex Cannon Wyvern is like Kogaji. If your opponent has 3 or more damage, he attacks for 11k. With Rising Phoenix, he can still make that very particular 16k row, and that just makes him a very solid unit for this deck. If you have to call triggers, it's still making magic numbers. Same thing applies to Whirlwind Axe Wielding Exorcist Knight. The only difference is that he swings for 12k instead of 11k. He can still make 17k rows or 18k rows with Guld or Kogaji if you have to call any of them out. So he still makes a very strong beater all around. Chigasumi is also an 11k attacker, but his 11k is a lot less consistent. That being said, you can still attack with him in the final row with a Rising Phoenix boost. Your opponent's going to have to discard for the first attack. Your opponent's going to guard the second attack. Then he'll be 16k after the third attack. So he's still very solid in this deck. He has perfect synergy, and he doubles up as an 11k attacker if you don't have him with a Dreadmaster in row. And the other situation is, of course, if you are trying to force a discard by having Chigasumi boosted by Dreadmaster, or just trying to force them to guard it. So we have the grade 3s over here. Voidmaster is 9,000 power. He's an absolutely terrible Vanguard because his skills have no synergy whatsoever for being Vanguard. You do the check if you have less cards after you Twin Drive. You do the check if you have more cards before you Twin Drive. All in all, he's a terrible card as Vanguard, but as Rearguard, he is amazing. If you have him together with Dreadmaster, that's a 16,000 power row that you're going to be swinging into a rearguard. Your opponent's going to have to drop 10,000 shield, or they're going to have to discard 2 cards and lose a rearguard. That means that this is always going to be blocked, and if it's not going to be blocked, you end up plussing severely anyway. So that makes this card extremely deadly to your opponent, especially when you're running 16 criticals, because they're going to have to stop this attack, which would normally be a non-threatening attack. Then you're going to attack with Dungaree, and if you pull any critical triggers, If your opponent guards Dungaree, they're going to have to also guard the side row after that, which is going to have one of your many other grade 2s. So that's why the 16 criticals are so deadly in here, because your opponent has to guard the first attack, they have to guard the second attack for fear of criticals, and they have to guard the third attack, which gets the criticals passed to it. In addition to this, Dungaree also allows you to counterblast 1 for a cheap plus. Because you have 3 bound cards now instead of 2, you can now retire 2 units with Dungaree over the course of the game, and still end up with the 11,000 base power. If you really want to push, you can also drop him down to 9,000 power and retire 3 units, but that feels kind of unnecessary most of the time, because over the course of the game I found that people are unable to guard the Nubatama units completely every single time. All in all, this deck, when put together, gives you extremely cheap pluses. It gives you a lot of good critical pressure. Your opponent is going to have to guard everything, or they're going to start losing a bunch of cards or taking a bunch of damage. All in all, I find that this deck is extremely lethal when everything works, but unfortunately, if you miss Dungaree, then the deck kind of falls apart. All in all, I think that it's a pretty solid deck, considering what it's built for and what it does. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a nice day!